Veronica presents Part 5 of the AI Repertory Theatre's production of At the Earth's Core by Edgar Burroughs. After witnessing the horrific ritual of the Mahars, David has escaped the creature's hidden stone temple. Chapter 9. The Face of Death.
I must have fallen asleep from exhaustion. When I awoke, I was very hungry, and after busying myself searching for fruit for a while, I set off through the jungle to find the beach. I knew that the island was not so large, but that I could easily find the sea if I did but move in a straight line. But there came the difficulty, as there was no way in which I could direct my course and hold it, the sun, of course, being always directly above my head, and the trees so thickly set that I could see no distant object which might serve to guide me in a straight line. As it was, I must have walked for a great distance, since I ate 4 times and slept twice before I reached the sea. But at last I did so, and my pleasure at the sight of it was greatly enhanced by the chance discovery of a hidden canoe among the bushes through which I had stumbled just prior to coming upon the beach. I can tell you that it did not take me long to pull that awkward craft down to the water and shove it far out from shore. My experience with Ja had taught me that if I were to steal another canoe, I must be quick about it and get far beyond the owner's reach as soon as possible. I must have come out upon the opposite side of the island from that at which Ja and I had entered it, for the mainland was nowhere in sight. For a long time I paddled around the shore, though well out, before I saw the mainland in the distance. At the sight of it, I lost no time in directing my course toward it, for I had long since made up my mind to return to Phutra and give myself up that I might be once more with Perry and Gok the hairy one. I felt that I was a fool ever to have attempted to escape alone, especially in view of the fact that our plans were already well formulated to make a break for freedom together. Of course, I realized that the chances of the success of our proposed venture were slim indeed. But I knew that I never could enjoy freedom without Perry so long as the old man lived, and I had learned that the probability that I might find him was less than slight. Had Perry been dead, I should gladly have pitted my strength and wit against the savage and primordial world in which I found myself. I could have lived in seclusion within some rocky cave until I had found the means to outfit myself with the crude weapons of the Stone Age, and then set out in search of her whose image had now become the constant companion of my waking hours, and the central and beloved figure of my dreams. But, to the best of my knowledge, Perry still lived, and it was my duty and wish to be again with him, that we might share the dangers and vicissitudes of the strange world we had discovered. And Gak, too. The great shaggy man had found a place in the hearts of us both, for he was indeed every inch a man and king. Uncouth, perhaps, and brutal, too, if judged too harshly by the standards of effete 20th century civilization, but withal noble, dignified, chivalrous, and lovable. Chance carried me to the very beach upon which I had discovered Ja's canoe, and a short time later I was scrambling up the steep bank to retrace my steps from the plain of Phutra. But my troubles came when I entered the canyon beyond the summit, for here I found that several of them centered at the point where I crossed the divide, and which one I had traversed to reach the pass I could not for the life of me remember. It was all a matter of chance, and so I set off down that which seemed the easiest going, and in this I made the same mistake that many of us do in selecting the path along which we shall follow out the course of our lives, and again learned that it is not always best to follow the line of least resistance. By the time I had eaten 8 meals and slept twice, I was convinced that I was upon the wrong trail, for between Phutra and the inland sea I had not slept at all, and had eaten but once. To retrace my steps to the summit of the divide and explore another canyon seemed the only solution of my problem, but a sudden widening and levelness of the canyon just before me seemed to suggest that it was about to open into a level country, and with the lure of discovery strong upon me, I decided to proceed but a short distance farther before I turned back. The next turn of the canyon brought me to its mouth, and before me, I saw a narrow plain leading down to an ocean. At my right, the side of the canyon continued to the water's edge, the valley lying to my left, and the foot of it running gradually into the sea, where it formed a broad level beach. Clumps of strange trees dotted the landscape here and there, almost to the water, and rank grass and ferns grew between. From the nature of the vegetation, I was convinced that the land between the ocean and the foothills was swampy, though directly before me it seemed dry enough all the way to the sandy strip along which the restless waters advanced and retreated. Curiosity prompted me to walk down to the beach, for the scene was very beautiful. As I passed along beside the deep and tangled vegetation of the swamp, I thought that I saw a movement of the ferns at my left. But though I stopped a moment to look, it was not repeated, and if anything lay hid there, my eyes could not penetrate the dense foliage to discern it. Presently, I stood upon the beach looking out over the wide and lonely sea, across whose forbidding bosom no human being had yet ventured, to discover what strange and mysterious lands lay beyond, or what its invisible islands held of riches, wonders, or adventure. What savage faces, what fierce and formidable beasts were this very instant watching the lapping of the waves upon its farther shore? How far did it extend? Perry had told me that the seas of Pellucidar were small in comparison with those of the outer crust, but even so, this great ocean might stretch its broad expanse for thousands of miles. For countless ages, it had rolled up and down its countless miles of shore, and yet today, it remained all unknown beyond the tiny strip that was visible from its beaches. The fascination of speculation was strong upon me. It was as though I had been carried back to the birth time of our own outer world to look upon its lands and seas ages before man had traversed either. Here was a new world, all untouched. It called to me to explore it. I was dreaming of the excitement and adventure which lay before us could Perry and I but escape the Mahars, when something, a slight noise I imagine, drew my attention behind me. As I turned, romance, adventure, and discovery in the abstract took wing before the terrible embodiment of all three in concrete form that I beheld advancing upon me. A huge, slimy amphibian it was, with toad-like body and the mighty jaws of an alligator. Its immense carcass must have weighed tons, and yet it moved swiftly and silently toward me. Upon one hand was the bluff that ran from the canyon to the sea, on the other, the fearsome swamp from which the creature had sneaked upon me. Behind lay the mighty, untracked sea, and before me, in the center of the narrow way that led to safety, stood this huge mountain of terrible and menacing flesh. A single glance at the thing was sufficient to assure me that I was facing one of those long-extinct, prehistoric creatures whose fossilized remains are found within the outer crust, as far back as the Triassic formation. A gigantic labyrinthodon. And there I was, unarmed, and with the exception of a loincloth, as naked as I had come into the world. I could imagine how my first ancestor felt that distant prehistoric morn, that he encountered for the first time the terrifying progenitor of the thing that had me cornered now beside the restless, mysterious sea. Unquestionably, he had escaped, or I should not have been within Pellucidar or elsewhere, and I wished at that moment that he had handed down to me with the various attributes that I presumed I have inherited from him, the specific application of the instinct of self-preservation, which saved him from the fate which loomed so close before me today. To seek escape in the swamp or in the ocean would have been similar to jumping into a den of lions to escape one upon the outside. The sea and swamp both were doubtless alive with these mighty carnivorous amphibians, and if not, the individual that menaced me would pursue me into either the sea or the swamp with equal facility. There seemed nothing to do but stand supinely and await my end. I thought of Perry, how he would wonder what had become of me. I thought of my friends of the outer world and of how they all would go on living their lives in total ignorance of the strange and terrible fate that had overtaken me, or unguessing the weird surroundings which had witnessed the last frightful agony of my extinction. And with these thoughts came a realization of how unimportant to the life and happiness of the world is the existence of any one of us. We may be snuffed out without an instant's warning, and for a brief day our friends speak of us with subdued voices. The following morning, while the first worm is busily engaged in testing the construction of our coffin, they are teeing up for the first hole to suffer more acute sorrow over a sliced ball than they did over our, to us, untimely demise. The labyrinthodon was coming more slowly now. He seemed to realize that escape from me was impossible, and I could have sworn that his huge fanged jaws grinned in pleasurable appreciation of my predicament. Or was it in anticipation of the juicy morsel which would so soon be pulp between those formidable teeth? He was about 50 feet from me when I heard a voice calling to me from the direction of the bluff at my left. I looked and could have shouted in delight at the sight that met my eyes, for there stood Ja, waving frantically to me and urging me to run for it to the cliff's base. I had no idea that I should escape the monster that had marked me for his breakfast, but at least I should not die alone. Human eyes would watch me end. It was cold comfort, I presume, but yet I derived some slight peace of mind from the contemplation of it. To run seemed ridiculous, especially toward that steep and unscalable cliff, and yet I did so. And as I ran, I saw Ja, agile as a monkey, crawl down the precipitous face of the rocks, clinging to small projections and the tough creepers that had found roothold here and there. The labyrinthodon evidently thought that Ja was coming to double his portion of human flesh, so he was in no haste to pursue me to the cliff and frighten away this other tidbit. Instead, he merely trotted along behind me. As I approached the foot of the cliff, I saw what Ja intended doing, but I doubted if the thing would prove successful. He had come down to within 20 feet of the bottom, and there, clinging with one hand to a small ledge and with his feet resting precariously upon tiny bushes that grew from the solid face of the rock, he lowered the point of his long spear until it hung some 6 feet above the ground. To clamber up that slim shaft without dragging Ja down and precipitating both to the same doom from which the copper-colored one was attempting to save me seemed utterly impossible. And as I came near the spear, I told Ja so, and that I could not risk him to try to save myself. But he insisted that he knew what he was doing and was in no danger himself.
The danger is still yours,
He called.
for unless you move much more rapidly than you are now, the Scythic will be upon you and drag you back before ever you are halfway up the spear. He can rear up and reach you with ease anywhere below where I stand.
Well, Ja should know his own business, I thought, and so I grasped the spear and clambered up toward the red man as rapidly as I could, being so far removed from my simian ancestors as I am. I imagine the slow-witted Scythic, as Ja called him, suddenly realized our intentions and that he was quite likely to lose all his meal instead of having it doubled as he had hoped. When he saw me clambering up that spear, he let out a hiss that fairly shook the ground and came charging after me at a terrific rate. I had reached the top of the spear by this time, or almost. Another 6 inches would give me a hold on Ja's hand when I felt a sudden wrench from below, and glancing fearfully downward, saw the mighty jaws of the monster close on the sharp point of the weapon. I made a frantic effort to reach Ja's hand. The Scythic gave a tremendous tug that came near to jerking Ja from his frail hold on the surface of the rock. The spear slipped from his fingers, and still clinging to it, I plunged feet foremost toward my executioner. At the instant that he felt the spear come away from Ja's hand, the creature must have opened his huge jaws to catch me, for when I came down, still clinging to the butt end of the weapon, the point yet rested in his mouth, and the result was that the sharpened end transfixed his lower jaw. With the pain, he snapped his mouth closed. I fell upon his snout, lost my hold upon the spear, rolled the length of his face and head, across his short neck onto his broad back, and from there to the ground. Scarce had I touched the earth than I was upon my feet, dashing madly for the path by which I had entered this horrible valley. A glance over my shoulder showed me the Scythic engaged in pawing at the spear stuck through his lower jaw, and so busily engaged did he remain in this occupation that I had gained the safety of the cliff top before he was ready to take up the pursuit. When he did not discover me in sight within the valley, he dashed, hissing, into the rank vegetation of the swamp, and that was the last I saw of him.
Chapter 10. Phutra again.
I hastened to the cliff edge above Ja and helped him to a secure footing. He would not listen to any thanks for his attempt to save me, which had come so near miscarrying.
I had given you up for lost when you tumbled into the Mahar temple,
He said,
for not even I could save you from their clutches, and you may imagine my surprise when on seeing a canoe dragged up upon the beach of the mainland, I discovered your own footprints in the sand beside it. I immediately set out in search of you, knowing as I did that you must be entirely unarmed and defenseless against the many dangers which lurk upon the mainland, both in the form of savage beasts and reptiles, and men as well. I had no difficulty in tracking you to this point. It is well that I arrived when I did.
"But why did you do it?" I asked, puzzled at this show of friendship on the part of a man of another world and a different race and color.
You saved my life.
He replied,
From that moment it became my duty to protect and befriend you. I would have been no true Mezop had I evaded my plain duty, but it was a pleasure in this instance, for I like you. I wish that you would come and live with me. You shall become a member of my tribe. Among us there is the best of hunting and fishing, and you shall have, to choose a mate from, the most beautiful girls of Pellucidar. Will you come?
I told him about Perry then, and Diane the Beautiful, and how my duty was to them first. Afterward, I should return and visit him, if I could ever find his island.
Oh, that is easy, my friend.
he said.
You need merely to come to the foot of the highest peak of the mountains of the clouds. There you will find a river which flows into the Luralaz. Directly opposite the mouth of the river, you will see 3 large islands far out, so far that they are barely discernible. The one to the extreme left as you face them from the mouth of the river is Anarok, where I rule the tribe of Anarok.
But how am I to find the mountains of the clouds? I asked.
Men say that they are visible from half Pellucidar,
He replied. How large is Pellucidar? I asked, wondering what sort of theory these primitive men had concerning the form and substance of their world.
The Mahars say it is round, like the inside of a tola shell.
He answered.
But that is ridiculous, since were it true, we should fall back were we to travel far in any direction, and all the waters of Pellucidar would run to one spot and drown us. No, Pellucidar is quite flat and extends no man knows how far in all directions. At the edges, so my ancestors have reported and handed down to me, is a great wall that prevents the earth and waters from escaping over into the burning sea whereon Pellucidar floats. But I never have been so far from Anarok as to have seen this wall with my own eyes. However, it is quite reasonable to believe that this is true, whereas there is no reason at all in the foolish belief of the Mahars. According to them, Pellucidarians who live upon the opposite side walk always with their heads pointed downward.
And Ja laughed uproariously at the very thought.
La ha 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 ha!
It was plain to see that the human folk of this inner world had not advanced far in learning, and the thought that the ugly Mahars had so outstripped them was a very pathetic one indeed. I wondered how many ages it would take to lift these people out of their ignorance, even were it given to Perry and me to attempt it. Possibly we would be killed for our pains, as were those men of the outer world who dared challenge the dense ignorance and superstitions of the Earth's younger days. But it was worth the effort if the opportunity ever presented itself. And then it occurred to me that here was an opportunity, that I might make a small beginning upon Ja, who was my friend, and thus note the effect of my teaching upon a Pellucidarian. Ja, I said, what would you say were I to tell you that insofar as the Mahar's theory of the shape of Pellucidar is concerned, it is correct?
I would say,
He replied,
that either you are a fool or took me for one.
But Ja, I insisted, if their theory is incorrect, how do you account for the fact that I was able to pass through the Earth from the outer crust to Pellucidar? If your theory is correct, all is a sea of flame beneath us, wherein no peoples could exist, and yet I come from a great world that is covered with human beings, and beasts and birds and fishes in mighty oceans.
You live upon the underside of Pellucidar and walk always with your head pointed downward?
He scoffed.
And were I to believe that, my friend, I should indeed be mad.
I attempted to explain the force of gravity to him, and by the means of the dropped fruit, to illustrate how impossible it would be for a body to fall off the earth under any circumstances. He listened so intently that I thought I had made an impression, and started the train of thought that would lead him to a partial understanding of the truth. But I was mistaken.
Your own illustration,
He said finally.
proves the falsity of your theory.
He dropped a fruit from his hand to the ground.
See,
He said,
without support, even this tiny fruit falls until it strikes something that stops it. If Pellucidar were not supported upon the flaming sea, it too would fall as the fruit falls. You have proven it yourself.
He had me that time. You could see it in his eye. It seemed a hopeless job, and I gave it up, temporarily at least, for when I contemplated the necessity explanation of our solar system and the universe, I realized how futile it would be to attempt to picture to Ja or any other Pellucidarian the sun, the moon, the planets, and the countless stars.
Without support, even this tiny fruit falls until it strikes something that stops it. If Pellucidar were not supported upon the flaming sea, it too would fall as the fruit falls. You have proven it yourself.
Those born within the inner world could no more conceive of such things than can we of the outer crust reduce to factors appreciable to our finite minds, such terms as space and eternity. Well, Ja, I laughed, whether we be walking with our feet up or down, here we are. And the question of greatest importance is not so much where we came from as where we are going now. For my part, I wish that you could guide me to Phutra, where I may give myself up to the Mahars once more, that my friends and I may work out the plan of escape, which the Sagoths interrupted when they gathered us together and drove us to the arena to witness the punishment of the slaves who killed the guardsmen. I wish now that I had not left the arena, for by this time my friends and I might have made good our escape, whereas this delay may mean the wrecking of all our plans, which depended for their consummation upon the continued sleep of the 3 Mahars who lay in the pit beneath the building in which we were confined.
You would return to captivity,
Cried Ja. My friends are there, I replied. The only friends I have in Pellucidar except yourself. What else may I do under the circumstances? He thought for a moment in silence. Then he shook his head sorrowfully.
It is what a brave man and a good friend should do,
He said.
Yet it seems most foolish, for the Mahars will most certainly condemn you to death for running away, and so you will be accomplishing nothing for your friends by returning. Never in all my life have I heard of a prisoner returning to the Mahars of his own free will. There are but few who escape them, though some do, and these would rather die than be recaptured.
I see no other way, Ja, I said, though I can assure you that I would rather go to Sheol after Perry than to Phutra. However, Perry is much too pious to make the probability at all great that I should ever be called upon to rescue him from the former locality. Ja asked me what Sheol was, and when I explained, as best I could, he said,
You are speaking of Molop-Az, the flaming sea upon which Pellucidar floats. All the dead who are buried in the ground go there. Piece by piece they are carried down to Molop-Az by the little demons who dwell there. We know this because when graves are opened, we find that the bodies have been partially or entirely borne off. That is why we of Anarok place our dead in high trees where the birds may find them and bear them bit by bit to the dead world above the land of awful shadow. If we kill an enemy, we place his body in the ground that it may go to Molop-Az.
As we talked, we had been walking up the canyon down which I had come to the great ocean and the Sifik. Ja did his best to dissuade me from returning to Phutra, but when he saw that I was determined to do so, he consented to guide me to a point from which I could see the plain where lay the city. To my surprise, the distance was but short from the beach where I had again met Ja. It was evident that I had spent much time following the windings of a tortuous canyon, while just beyond the ridge lay the city of Phutra, near to which I must have come several times. As we topped the ridge and saw the granite gate towers dotting the flowered plain at our feet, Ja made a final effort to persuade me to abandon my mad purpose and return with him to Anarok. But I was firm in my resolve, and at last he bid me goodbye, assured in his own mind that he was looking upon me for the last time. I was sorry to part with Ja, for I had come to like him very much indeed. With his hidden city upon the island of Anarok as a base, and his savage warriors as escort, Perry and I could have accomplished much in the line of exploration, and I hoped that were we successful in our effort to escape, we might return to Anarok later. There was, however, one great thing to be accomplished first, at least it was the great thing to me, the finding of Diane the Beautiful. I wanted to make amends for the affront I had put upon her in my ignorance, and I wanted to see her again, and to be with her. Down the hillside, I made my way into the gorgeous field of flowers, and then across the rolling land toward the shadowless columns that guard the ways to buried Phutra. At a quarter mile from the nearest entrance, I was discovered by the Sagoth guard, and in an instant 4 of the guerrilla men were dashing toward me. Though they brandished their long spears and yelled like wild Comanches, I paid not the slightest attention to them, walking quietly toward them, as though unaware of their existence. My manner had the effect upon them that I had hoped, and as we came quite near together, they ceased their savage shouting. It was evident that they had expected me to turn and flee at sight of them, thus presenting that which they most enjoyed, a moving human target at which to cast their spears.
"What do you here?"
shouted one, and then, as he recognized me,
"Ho, it is the slave who claims to be from another world, he who escaped when the Thag ran amok within the amphitheater. But why do you return, having once made good your escape?"
I did not escape, I replied. I but ran away to avoid the Thag, as did others, and coming into a long passage I became confused and lost my way in the foothills beyond Phutra. Only now have I found my way back.
"And you come of your free will back to Phutra?"
exclaimed one of the guardsmen. Where else might I go? I asked. I am a stranger within Pellucidar and know no other where than Phutra. Why should I not desire to be in Phutra? Am I not well fed and well treated? Am I not happy? What better lot could man desire? The Sagoths scratched their heads. This was a new one on them, and so, being stupid brutes, they took me to their masters, whom they felt would be better fitted to solve the riddle of my return. For riddle, they still considered it. I had spoken to the Sagoths as I had for the purpose of throwing them off the scent of my purposed attempt at escape. If they thought that I was so satisfied with my lot within Phutra that I would voluntarily return when I had once had so excellent an opportunity to escape, they would never for an instant imagine that I could be occupied in arranging another escape immediately upon my return to the city. So they led me before a slimy mahar who clung to a slimy rock within the large room that was the thing's office. With cold, reptilian eyes, the creature seemed to bore through the thin veneer of my deceit and read my inmost thoughts. It heeded the story which the Sagoths told of my return to Phutra, watching the gorilla men's lips and fingers during the recital. Then it questioned me through one of the Sagoths.
You say that you returned to Phutra of your own free will, because you think yourself better off here than elsewhere. Do you not know that you may be the next chosen to give up your life in the interest of the wonderful scientific investigations that our learned ones are continually occupied with?
I hadn't heard of anything of that nature, but I thought best not to admit it. I could be in no more danger here, I said, than naked and unarmed in the savage jungles or upon the lonely plains of Pellucidar. I was fortunate, I think, to return to Phutra at all. As it was, I barely escaped death within the jaws of a huge Siphic. No, I am sure that I am safer in the hands of intelligent creatures such as rule Phutra. At least such would be the case in my own world, where human beings like myself rule supreme. There, the higher races of man extend protection and hospitality to the stranger within their gates. And being a stranger here, I naturally assumed that a like courtesy would be accorded me. The Mahar looked at me in silence for some time after I ceased speaking, and the Sagoth had translated my words to his master. The creature seemed deep in thought. Presently, he communicated some message to the Sagoth. The latter turned, and motioning me to follow him, left the presence of the reptile. Behind and on either side of me marched the balance of the guard. "What are they going to do with me?" I asked the fellow at my right.
You are to appear before the learned ones who will question you regarding this strange world from which you say you come.
After a moment's silence, he turned to me again.
Do you happen to know,
he asked,
what the Mahars do to slaves who lie to them?
No, I replied, nor does it interest me, as I have no intention of lying to the Mahars.
Then be careful that you don't repeat the impossible tale you told Saltoto just now. Another world, indeed, where human beings rule,
he concluded in fine scorn. But it is the truth, I insisted. From where else then did I come? I am not of Pellucidar. Anyone with half an eye could see that.
It is your misfortune, then,
he remarked dryly,
that you may not be judged by one with but half an eye.
What will they do with me, I asked, if they do not have a mind to believe me?
You may be sentenced to the arena or go to the pits to be used in research work by the learned ones,
he replied. And what will they do with me there? I persisted.
No one knows except the Mahars and those who go to the pits with them. But as the latter never return, their knowledge does them but little good. It is said that the learned ones cut up their subjects while they are yet alive, thus learning many useful things. However, I should not imagine that it would prove very useful to him who was being cut up. But of course, this is all but conjecture. The chances are that ere long you will know much more about it than I.
And he grinned as he spoke. The Sagoths have a well-developed sense of humor. And suppose it is the arena, I continued. What then?
You saw the two who met the Tarag and the Thag the time that you escaped,
he said. Yes.
Your end in the arena would be similar to what was intended for them,
he explained.
Though, of course, the same kinds of animals might not be employed.
It is sure death in either event? I asked.
What becomes of those who go below with the learned ones I do not know, nor does any other,
he replied.
But those who go to the arena may come out alive, and thus regain their liberty, as did the two whom you saw.
They gained their liberty? And how?
It is the custom of the Mahars to liberate those who remain alive within the arena after the beasts depart or are killed. Thus it has happened that several mighty warriors from far distant lands, whom we have captured on our slave raids, have battled the brutes turned in upon them and slain them, thereby winning their freedom. In the instance which you witnessed, the beasts killed each other, but the result was the same. The man and woman were liberated, furnished with weapons, and started on their homeward journey. Upon the left shoulder of each, a mark was burned, the mark of the Mahars, which will forever protect these two from slaving parties.
There is a slender chance for me then if I be sent to the arena, and none at all if the learned ones drag me to the pits.
You are quite right,
He replied,
but do not felicitate yourself too quickly should you be sent to the arena, for there is scarce 1 in 1,000 who comes out alive.
To my surprise, they returned me to the same building in which I had been confined with Perry and Gack before my escape. At the doorway, I was turned over to the guards there.
He will doubtless be called before the investigators shortly,
Said he who had brought me back.
so have him in readiness.
The guards in whose hands I now found myself, upon hearing that I had returned of my own volition to Phutra, evidently felt that it would be safe to give me liberty within the building, as had been the custom before I had escaped, and so I was told to return to whatever duty had been mine formerly. My first act was to hunt up Perry, whom I found poring as usual over the great tomes that he was supposed to be merely dusting and rearranging upon new shelves. As I entered the room, he glanced up and nodded pleasantly to me, only to resume his work as though I had never been away at all. I was both astonished and hurt at his indifference, and to think that I was risking death to return to him purely from a sense of duty and affection. "Why, Perry," I exclaimed, "haven't you a word for me after my long absence?"
Long absence?
He repeated in evident astonishment.
What do you mean?
"Are you crazy, Perry? Do you mean to say that you have not missed me since that time we were separated by the charging thag within the arena?"
That time?
He repeated.
Why, man, I have but just returned from the arena. You reached here almost as soon as I. Had you been much later, I should indeed have been worried. And as it is, I had intended asking you about how you escaped the beast, as soon as I had completed the translation of this most interesting passage.
"Perry, you are mad," I exclaimed. "Why, the Lord only knows how long I have been away. I have been to other lands, discovered a new race of humans within Pellucidar, seen the Mahars at their worship in their hidden temple, and barely escaped with my life from them, and from a great labyrinthodon that I met afterward, following my long and tedious wanderings across an unknown world. I must have been away for months, Perry, and now you barely look up from your work when I return and insist that we have been separated but a moment. Is that any way to treat a friend? I'm surprised at you, Perry, and if I'd thought for a moment that you cared no more for me than this, I should not have returned to chance death at the hands of the Mahars for your sake." The old man looked at me for a long time before he spoke. There was a puzzled expression upon his wrinkled face, and a look of hurt sorrow in his eyes.
David, my boy,
He said,
how could you for a moment doubt my love for you? There is something strange here that I cannot understand. I know that I am not mad, and I am equally sure that you are not. But how in the world are we to account for the strange hallucinations that each of us seems to harbor relative to the passage of time since last we saw each other? You are positive that months have gone by, while to me it seems equally certain that not more than an hour ago I sat beside you in the amphitheater. Can it be that both of us are right and at the same time both are wrong? First tell me what time is, and then maybe I can solve our problem. Do you catch my meaning?
"I didn't, and said so,"
Yes,
continued the old man.
we are both right. To me, bent over my book here, there has been no lapse of time. I have done little and nothing to waste my energies, and so have required neither food nor sleep. But you, on the contrary, have walked and fought and wasted strength and tissue which must needs be rebuilt by nutriment and food. And so, having eaten and slept many times since last you saw me, you naturally measure the lapse of time largely by these acts. As a matter of fact, David, I am rapidly coming to the conviction that there is no such thing as time. Surely there can be no time here within Pellucidar, where there are no means for measuring or recording time. Why the Mahars themselves take no account of such a thing as time. I find here in all their literary works but a single tense, the present. There seems to be neither past nor future with them. Of course, it is impossible for our outer earthly minds to grasp such a condition, but our recent experiences seem to demonstrate its existence.
It was too big a subject for me, and I said so. But Perry seemed to enjoy nothing better than speculating upon it, and after listening with interest to my account of the adventures through which I had passed, he returned once more to the subject, which he was enlarging upon with considerable fluency when he was interrupted by the entrance of a Sagoth.
Come,
Commanded the intruder, beckoning to me.
the investigators would speak with you.
Goodbye, Perry, I said, clasping the old man's hand. There may be nothing but the present, and no such thing as time. But I feel that I am about to take a trip into the hereafter from which I shall never return. If you and Gak should manage to escape, I want you to promise me that you will find Diane the Beautiful and tell her that with my last words I asked her forgiveness for the unintentional affront I put upon her, and that my one wish was to be spared long enough to right the wrong that I had done her. Tears came to Perry's eyes.
I cannot believe but that you will return, David,
He said,
It would be awful to think of living out the balance of my life without you among these hateful and repulsive creatures. If you are taken away, I shall never escape, for I feel that I am as well off here as I should be anywhere within this buried world. Goodbye, my boy. Goodbye.
And then his old voice faltered and broke, and as he hid his face in his hands, the Sagoth guardsman grasped me roughly by the shoulder and hustled me from the chamber.
We hope you enjoyed part 5 of AIRT's production of At the Earth's Core by Edgar Rice Burroughs. If you would like more of this kind of story, please let us know in the comments.